too atonal for me.
It was. Good morning, Mr. Soundman.
The panel is called Avantgarde versus Functional Music, and of course I had something in mind when I called it like this, because I notice, living in Berlin, I see a rich and multi-flavored culture of sports lounges, hangouts, clubs where you can listen to music, but I sometimes am really irritated by the fact that DJs or also bands or people who design rooms or fill rooms with life, that they basically try to anticipate what people like. It's like preaching to the converted. Whereas I see Dimitri with his approach to confront people with stuff they probably haven't heard of before, or to confront them with things that will change their mindset, is not necessarily unique, but you did it for decades. And I wonder, going back 30 years, when you started Atonal, was it like a reaction to a culture that didn't allow Atonal music, or was it...
I moved to Berlin in 2 years before I did Atonal, or 3 years before I did the first Atonal festival, and I was really impressed what I could listen to. These bands I had never heard before. I hung out in clubs and spaces where these bands like Sprung aus den Wolken or Notorische Reflexe or Didaktische Einheit, or later the Einstürzende Neubau, with these fantasyful names, where they played. It was a complete new world for me, this noise world. And what we did, we tried to bring them together, like to make a brand out of it. The last festival we did was 1990. It was a bridge festival already. The bands in those days were bands like early young Jeff Mills. The electronics came up more and more.
I want to ask you, since this panel is overwritten avant-garde and functional music, in a way techno is very functional music. It has to meet the beat, it has to build up like dramaturgical what you call arcs. And so basically you can only use records that are being produced for this case. Isn't this a contradiction to an old idea of like alles in Frage stellen? How would you say it in English? To doubt and to question everything.
It was, in 1990, this city was burning, this was crazy, man. The world was open, and the authorities, they just taught each other how to get the traffic down and all this. And in those days, I met Timothy Leary. He came over. I read an incredible speech in the Audimax of the #1 university of East Berlin. I went to the director and said, hey, because everybody was excited. I went to this director of this elite school, of East Berlin, the Humboldt University, and asked him. I told him there's a colleague, coming from Harvard. I want to talk, a colleague, and he said, it's Professor Dr. Timothy Leary, and he gave the Audimax, and we booked the Audimax, you must imagine it was still DDR. GDR. Timothy Leary entered the Audimax of the Humboldt University and had a great speech from psychedelics to cybernetics, from LSD to cyberspace. And these things were possible, because everybody was confused, and and maybe this was the best condition to start a movement, especially always if things happening, revolutions and similar things. And then we started this revolution with the techno.
Still, we have another guest here.
Yeah,
who almost doesn't speak because he's so polite and
that's so interesting.
Yeah, as I said, you're so. And but I want to know from you, one thing, like, have you experienced the Tresor and all the spaces Dimitri is mentioning? And I would like to hear from you, like, how you experienced them.
When I moved to Berlin in the 90s, I lived on the other side of the street of the old Tresor, so I went in many times. And how I experienced these nights, I don't want to get too detailed about.
Come on, we are all friends, we are all Facebook friends.
Let's keep it like that.
Okay, maybe I should interrupt because there's this great record he did a year ago. I mean, it came out last year, maybe he worked a longer time on it. But it's basically, I mean, this illustrates probably what you're just saying. It's an album where he was basically annoyed of the noises from a construction site outside his flat, and he, instead of like writing letters to Klaus Wowereit, he started to record the sounds of the construction site. So it became basically a Pierre Schaeffer musique concrète moment that you basically did, and then again, I mean, and then you released it.
The construction workers of different construction sites are unconsciously communicating through sound with each other. So that's how I heard it. For me, it sounded
response, or
exactly like one guy's hammering like a certain kind of rhythm, another guy like does the logic rhythm to it. So there's like a really sunrise moments were happening in this Immanuel Kirchstraße.
Oh, okay.
That was long ago.
So they finished the building.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's now totally gentrified and now very boring area. So it's exactly. It's passionate music that happened here, and it's not like a private TV station that delivers the most digestible food. And maybe through this festival, young people get to know all these things that happened before.
We try to build bridges to this past that we had, and that we want to give this to the next generation. We have this young team running this festival for us, doing the lineup, and they show things to us and we showed things to them. It was like a brainwashing. Now the brain works again, like an ecstasy without drugs, like a natural high.
I was once in China, in Shanghai, there was a discussion, and even China is really watching Berlin, you know, and the underground, and why it is so happening here in Berlin, and why all the young people come to Berlin. And they asked me, seriously asked me, how much is subculture? No? Can we buy it, you know?
That's a brilliant end of discussion, or EOM, as you say in the context of the corporations where I work with. It means end of message. Thank you everybody for being here, and see you around tonight.